President Marcos Jr. is midway through his term. Will he use his fourth State of the Nation address to start cementing a legacy? But wait, there's a legacy? What is this legacy? More to the point, are the remaining 3 years enough time to do more, much more? Hi, I'm John Nery, and you are in the Public Square. The preeminent economist Cielito Habito argues that stopping corruption could be Marcos Jr.'s legacy if he has the political will. The preeminent cultural critic Marian Pastor Roces warns us that the larger context, the deeper corruption, is democratic decay. I am delighted that both Professor Ciel Habito, former Secretary of Economic Development, and Marian Pastor Roces, who builds museums for a living, can join us today. Thank you, Ciel and Marian, for joining us in the Public Square.
Thank you so much, John. Glad to be here, especially with our partner in Brain Trust Inc., Marian Roces.
Yes, thank you so much.
Let me start
Ciel.
Thank you, Marian, and thank you, Ciel. Let me start with the question for Ciel. You wrote a really provocative column. Why the focus on corruption?
Well, I think we've known this for many, many years. That, in fact, I made that statement, which I believe is 100% true. Mm-hmm. We've got all the potentials. We've got very rich natural resources, very widely acknowledged all over the world. We've got abundant, resilient, very capable people, very talented. So we've got everything to be able to be one of those nations, really, economies way ahead of many others in the world. But what has held us back for decades is precisely our corrupt public officials, our politicians have been getting in the way of really implementing our development plans that we have been carefully crafting all through these years. So that has to be the single focus right now. Get us from near the bottom of the list in terms of the most corrupt countries in the world.
You put a number on this, right? I mean, 1/5 of our government money goes to line the pockets of government officials.
Literally, this has been an estimate not made by me, but made by the Deputy Ombudsman about 6 years ago. And it has been affirmed by institutions like the World Bank, IMF, the Asian Development Bank, through their own analysis of our public expenditure programs. So in fact, 20%, according to some, might even be an underestimate. We've been hearing, for example, from Senator Panfilo Lacson, from Mayor Benji Magalong, that it can go anywhere up to 70%, 40 to 70%, if you're talking about specific government projects alone. So really, the extent of this siphoning away of funds that could otherwise go into productive investments, public investments that will help build our nation, it's really the biggest waste that we'll be seeing. And of course, apart from that, apart from the money itself, is the decision making that actually affects our development trajectory, if I may put it that way, because we do have a sound policy agenda in our development plans and policies that go along with it. But again, when politicians own decisions, especially when they are self-serving policy directions, are the ones that hold sway, then again, it gets in the way of our trajectory for nation building.
Marian, I don't think you can quantify, you can put a number on what you call the deeper corruption, the decay of the system, but you've also argued that, in fact, the consequences are unavoidable. Can you talk more about that? From the point of view of culture, are we a deeply corrupt country?
As a student of culture, I do not kind of trade in fundamentalisms and sweeping statements. So having said that, I should like to say, though, that number one, democratic decay is ongoing in the world right now. So it is kind of something that's going on all over the world. So we are not outside that world. So much of it is geopolitical. what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the United States, what's happening in Latin America. That's all part of what's happening here. Secondly, with regard to the decay here, it then has particularities. And what are those particularities? Well, dynastic capture of power is very particular to us. And the extent to which we have dynasties, that's pretty extreme. And the normalization of that dynastic capture of power is a number two. It's not just in existence, it's also normal. How do you measure that? There are institutions that measure the impact of this kind of specific problematics. For the Philippines, I would dearly love to have and I'm looking at Shell, maybe there is a set of measures that can be devised for, let's say, giving a quantitative value to the impact of dynastic power in this country.
Maybe we can try and put a number to this. No, there are 4 sets of siblings serving in the Philippine Senate in the 20th Congress. So 8. That's 4 families, 8 votes, and there are 3 Romualdeses about to serve in the House of Representatives. So that could be it. But before we turn to the main topic, which is Marcos' legacy, and if he can really do something about stopping corruption, can I ask Shell first and then Marian? Democratic decay, does it accelerate corruption, or is it the other way around? Corruption's many opportunities speeds up the process of decay.
Well, let me take first crack. It seems to me that it goes both ways. But before I further answer that, Marian is talking about the need for more quantitative measures. And one simple one has been offered us already by the studies of Dr. Ron Mendoza, who has been looking at dynastyism over these years. And the simple fact that he has been pointing out is that from about 60% of our legislature and local positions being composed of politicians belonging to dynasties, it has gone up through the years, up to 70, now up to 80%, especially in our legislature. And of course, you mentioned, John, about 4 sets of siblings and being in the Senate alone. So this is the kind of numerical measure you can readily cite. That just by merely counting how many politicians in our political bodies, whether you're talking about local government positions or the legislature, you can actually track how much the incidence has been rising. But then again, going back to your question about which came first, I guess it's a classic chicken and egg question. But I'd like to think that it all started when our education status or education conditions in the country began deteriorating. And I would probably put that around the 1970s. And all of that has led to the kind of, shall we say, a public apathy now to corruption. And this is really what is making it very difficult to really curb corruption. It's been accepted as a reality. And people, of course, play along with it as well in terms of how vote buying is now so institutionalized that, again, any candidate who runs for office, whether well-meaning or, of course, those with ulterior motives, now tend to accept that reality, that this is something that has to be done to be able to get into public office. So even if one is so well-motivated, the first problem or the first challenge is to get into office, to get elected. And given the realities of the system right now, we've talked to progressive politicians who privately would admit to you, well, we have to do this because if we really want to be in the position to be able to change things, we have to go through this kind of a route first. So that's the reason why, in the end, as we have this kind of politics getting up, it is also leading precisely to what Marian has been describing as democratic decay. I mean, there's a systematic effort, in fact, among many of our leaders, not only political, but even economic leaders, to really keep things as they are, because that's how they perpetuate their power in our society. So that is, in fact, it seems to be a built-in mechanism to self-perpetuate this kind of situation we now are in.
Marian, chicken or egg?
Yeah, I of course this sounds like a safe answer, but it is actually the right answer. It's a dynamic; it works on each other. Democratic decay works on corruption, and vice versa. But I know that's not an answer really. What seems to be needed is to, like Shell did at the start of his response, he gave a date. He gave 1970s. I agree with Shell. It actually, I believe, began in the 1970s. This is a period, that is a martial law period, when impunity was rewarded. And at no time before, I hope the historians will agree with me on this, but it seems to me that there was no time before the 1970s when impunity in everything, in killing, in going around the Constitution, in vote buying, in everything that we see right now in monstrous form, actually began in 1970, 1980, when, how do I put this? When going against constitutional guardrails was allowed, when power was reconfigured, obviously by Marcos Sr., so that constitutional provisions to keep democratic institutions in place are not followed. And it became cultural. What do I mean by it became cultural? It became okay for everyone to agree that impunity is okay, that if you do not exercise one form of impunity or another in any field, in any dimension of public life, that kawawa ka, and you'll be warned, kawawa ka if you don't join up. You don't have a prayer of succeeding in anything. And I remember that from the 70s, say, sumali ka na. Sumali ka na sa propaganda. Halimbawa, no?
So given given this background, no, and we know of course that it was Marcos Sr. who was the ruler of the Philippines at that time. This makes Shell's column even more audacious. So I'd like to ask Shell first and then Marian, can a Marcos, himself the product of a dynasty, act against corruption?
Well, as I wrote in my column on this, like I said, I may be foolish. I may have too much faith in the innate goodness of human beings. But then again, I'd like to think that having had such a bad name for that family, that this Marcos would be driven to try and to redeem that name. And if that is an important objective for him, which I assume it is, then this is a time to actually try to reverse that kind of image that happened because of his parents. I even said that, it's his parents who were the very symbols of the kleptocracy.
That's right.
That is, they are now in the annals of our history as symbols of that kleptocracy. But if he actually does something to precisely curb that kleptocracy, then he can actually, in effect, redeem the family name through his own actions as president. So this is what I'm hoping for. Of course, as I've been half seriously and half kiddingly telling others about it, I know I'm a wishful thinker. I know I may be foolish, but still, that prayer is there. That is possible. So with the political will, as you mentioned at the outset, and if he does the right things, and I made 5 specific legislative proposals, which in fact will do a lot to reduce the opportunities for corruption in our government, all over our government, then again, he can really make a legacy within the remaining years of his presidency. And like I said, it's not 20 peso rice that he should be focusing on. It's really curbing corruption, because that is part of the problem why we don't have 20 peso rice.
Shell, I'm reminded of the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur, who has this concept of second naivete. The first naivete is, the innocence that we're born with, and then you realize, the world is so much darker than you expected, and so on. And yet, at a certain point, you decide, I will believe in, the capacity of humans to do well, and so on and so forth. So this is a second innocence. Marian, is that kind of second innocence, second naivete possible for Marcos? I mean, okay, we might have to distinguish between a Marcos like Ferdinand Jr. and a Marcos like Jaime Marcos, and maybe we can take it from there.
I'll shift around and pivot to another point. The innocence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think that it's innocence that will be of help to us who are trying our best for a better set of circumstances in which our children can live in. But I think we could work with a little bit of skepticism, but a realistic skepticism. I'm obviously describing my own approach, which is not cynical but skeptical. Now, what am I getting at? I think if you insist on the word legacy, it will happen, but despite Junior, not because of him. What do I mean? I think that the Marcoses have put in an enormous amount of resources in the rehabilitation of the family name. And I think that by the time that Ferdinand Jr. won the presidency, that they've actually done it. They've already done the work of rehabilitating. And as a matter of fact, Marcos Jr. has done his job, given what the stakes were for the family. So how is he behaving now? I'm sure that his handlers are telling him to take it easy, don't make dramatic political pronouncements, whatever red tagging there is, keep it on a low burning level, etc., etc. So it's kind of like a bland political environment that he's running the country through. Now, in that blandness, where there are no major political fireworks because of the Marcoses. The fireworks are from the Marcos Duterte feud. But if you're looking at the way he's running the government, you will see a lot of things that Filipinos, not crediting this to the Marcoses, Filipinos have learned to do. Off the top of my mind, number one, there are good people in his cabinet. Di ba, Shell? We have friends in his cabinet and they're really good people. They're not Marcosian. They're very good bureaucrats, and they're very good at separating the work of a bureaucracy, of a cabinet position, from the politics that changes every presidency. Now, I think we've learned that. I think we've learned that trick. It's something that Duterte did not, because he came in with a cabinet with hard left and hard right together. And we knew that that wasn't going to last because they were obviously going to kill each other. And it did happen that way. So that's not in any way learning how to navigate the crazy political life of the Philippines. Political life in the Philippines now shows us that there are enough good men and women who are in the bureaucracy. And number two, that people who are in think tanks, who are such as ours, in private consultancies and NGOs, and a lot of advocacy groups are now able to work with individual people in bureaucracy. That, I think, is going to bode well for the future. Not because of Marcos, but we've learned something. We've learned something through the Duterte period. Number two is we've learned how to deal with disinformation. John, you and I know this. While we may not by any long shot think that we're winning the war in disinformation, but you and I know that disinformation is being carried on at extremely complex levels, and that there are human beings in the Philippines and outside the Philippines who are actually fighting disinformation at that complex level. So we've also learned that. That's number two. Number three is policy making. There are policy people who are on their own creating policies in lieu of perhaps government delay or slowness. So as you can see, let's say we're in a flood situation right now. Everyone who is who's saying something really wise about flooding in the Philippines, private sector scientists working with scientists in government. I find this a newly strengthening stream in our culture. I'll leave it at that. So the answer in short is legacy despite the president.
or his legacy is getting out of the way. Shel, the next questions are for you. No? You proposed 5 specific laws, all to combat corruption, and you suggest the president should push these 5 laws. First question, do we need all 5 laws for his legacy to, be stopping corruption? If we don't, which of the 5 would you prioritize?
Okay, well, let me quickly summarize what those 5 laws are. The first one I mentioned was about transparency, and this is really pertaining more to wealth and asset transparency among our public officials. Second, of course, is this whistleblower policy. It makes it, let's make our citizens unafraid to actually expose corruption when they see it, and even reward them. And in the United States, you have this law that actually rewards whistleblowers out of proceeds from government revenues that were saved from corruption. A third one is on use of digital technology, e-governance, and we have the beginnings of that in the eGov app, which could be truly expanded to cover practically everything, every transaction in the government down to the barangay level. A fourth one is the justice system, so that we have a special fast-track corruption courts mechanism. Therefore, corruption cases can be dealt with and disposed of very quickly. And fifth, of course, is citizen participation, especially in budgeting and auditing. Now, because we tend to see corruption in terms of the pesos and centavos that are wasted, I would put importance to number 5, again, the citizen participation, because that actually, in a way, also addresses the transparency part of things. Because when citizens are given access to the budgeting process, and of course have a strong role in auditing the budget or the implementation of the budget, then, as I said, that could actually curb a lot of opportunities for corruption. And then, transparency, as I said, is really a very, very important fundamental. That's why it addresses the first and the last pieces of legislation. But the other thing that I did not list is precisely a law against dynasties. And the reason I did not is I guess the resignation that an enabling law, which will put into practice finally that constitutional provision against dynasties, cannot be expected out of a dynastic legislature. So there must be other ways to address that. But as I said, transparency seems to be the first, and of course the mechanisms to be able to penalize corrupt officials. And that's where I go to the fast-track corruption courts legislation as well. So ideally, we'd like to have all 5, even 6 if we can add the anti-dynasty law. But really, transparency is a very first item there. And notwithstanding the fact that we have come somewhat along that in terms of the Freedom of Information Act, we all know that the Freedom of Information Act, even though it passed years ago, is still not really providing for the kind of transparency that we all hope it would provide for. I mean, there's still so many gateways that you have to go through to finally get to the information that we need. But really, we simply have to have our public officials accountable. And for them to be accountable, people have to know what they are accountable for. And this is the reason why transparency, to me, is a very important foundation for all that.
Borrowing Marian's idea, is it possible that these laws these bills can become law even without the president behind it. Of course, he has to sign them into law, but barring the idea that all the president can do is just get out of the way, do you think that's possible, or do you need the president to actually push these for them to become reality?
Well, frankly, my own view is that you really need a president to push for it. Because again, for the same reason that an anti-dynasty law is not likely to come out of our current Congress and the Congresses that we've been voting into office, a lot of these laws that I've been mentioning also will go against the personal interests of many of our legislators. And so again, it's somewhat of a judgment call whether it can pass without the president's pushing. But I really believe that the president simply has to push. And that's been demonstrated in our history, that the president can actually push Congress to do certain things. And therefore, that push would be very important. But without it, do these kinds of legislations have any chance to pass? To me, it's highly questionable.
I like that you ground your proposals in real-life examples. No? You point to Estonia, you point to Indonesia,
Yes.
you point to Brazil. No? Would the private sector or the academic institutions have a role to play here? Maybe they can, I mean, we don't know much about what's happening in Estonia, for instance, right? And of course, Georgia is going through a turbulent time, right? And so would it be possible that you can get civil society behind the reasoning for these laws?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you mentioned academe, for example. I mean, academe is, of course, engaged in constant research. And the kind of research we simply need is to look at best practices, or not even best, but good practices elsewhere in the world. And, you can do this in the context of education improvement, for example. The thing I've been talking about a lot lately and writing about a lot lately is the need for us to simply copy these good things that are happening elsewhere. And that's why I decided I'd look at good practices elsewhere. And that's why this came up with this list of 5 legislations, really coming out of the experience of countries that have demonstrated that they have been able to dramatically reduce corruption. So that Estonia is there, Brazil is there, even Indonesia is there. I would challenge our academe, our business sector to study precisely these good practices that are being done elsewhere to great effect. And if we just do copying a lot, then we can go a long way. And by the way, I've said this a lot, even just in the context of agriculture and how to improve the way we have been managing agriculture. I mean, we are now in a position where the countries around us that we taught on agricultural science, and even in the running of agricultural cooperatives, where the successful countries like Thailand, Taiwan, Korea actually first got mentored in UP Los Baños on cooperatives, on agricultural cooperatives. Now we're the ones who can learn a lot from how they actually use that knowledge and how we did not use that knowledge for our own particular purposes in developing agriculture. So in short, my key word is copy. Let's not have too much pride to think that we can think things up ourselves. There's so much that we can already copy from elsewhere.
No need to reinvent the wheel, no, as they say.
Exactly, yeah.
Now the next few questions are for Marian. Marian, I don't know how many museums you've built all over the country. If you were building a museum today, let's say it's the Philippines in the first quarter of the 21st century. It's a museum for that. And you were curating its content. What would you say about Marcos Jr.? Might be too early, but...
Well, if I were curating for a group of people or an entity that is really interested in how we move from this point to the future based on what we understand the past perhaps 100 years or 50 years has been, if that were the circumstances of making this museum, then I will spend a lot of curatorial thinking on the actual cost of Marcosian culture let's
Okay.
call it Marxian culture, which began in the 1970s, which includes the impunity and the corruption and all of that, how much it has cost us as a people. It would essentially be an answer to the usual argument that, why should we not like Imelda? Why should we not like Marcos? They built the cultural center. They had all this cultural infrastructure in place. And my answer to that has always been, it cost us too much. The cost was too high. And what was that cost? It is exactly what we're talking about, the corruption. It became cultural. And so the museum that will have to be built is to explain how much we paid as a nation for the Marcos idea of culture, which is political culture, economic culture, and culture, even institutions, the cultural institutions. I think that even if you just talk about a small thing in the scheme of the range, like the money spent, for example, on the Cultural Center of the Philippines in 1969. Well, there are countries that you can cite all over the planet who spent it more on human development, on the development of artists, rather than buildings. And so you end up 70 years later with a building which is gorgeous, but which was an opportunity lost. So you can actually think of this in economic terms, even if much of what we're talking about cannot be measured in figures. But I use the metaphor of opportunities lost. I use the metaphor of how much it cost us. Even if how much it cost us really is in the twisting around of our brains. And that's kind of museum we need right now, to actually assess that and then move forward. Now, there's a second part of that, and it's a much bigger field. It's the fact that we are in the 21st century, and we are in the midst of massive, the word massive does not even begin to describe what we're going through right now. The demographic changes in the Philippines alone, not to mention the rest of the world, is incredible. We have more than 50% of our population who are digital natives, who do not speak the language of their parents, who are savvy in things that we will never hope to be savvy in. And then there's AI, which is going to change the nature of what it is to be human, or what it is to live with climate change. The extraordinary changes are existential changes to the human species itself, not to mention the Philippines alone. But the problem of the Philippines is that we are so absorbed and so corrupted by our systems that we are not equipped to address it as a nation. There are Filipinos who are equipped to address all of these things as individuals, as groups, as entities, maybe even as government offices. But as a nation, we are losing the opportunity to address these changes.
Wow.
John, I think what Marian has been saying underscores one important fact, and that is our people, our human beings, our Filipinos, are our single greatest resource. And again, if we were to talk about what Marcos Jr. could leave as a legacy, I would hope that it would really be in terms of having truly invested in our people. And we've been hearing a lot about the talk about how we have neglected our successor generation, the young children who are still, too much of them being severely malnourished, so that their whole future is already compromised. I've been talking about how the so-called demographic sweet spot can actually become a demographic time bomb unless we address the fact that about a third, or now down to maybe a fourth, of our young children do not even have that mental capacity to maximize their mental and physical potential because of this prevalence of stunting and severe malnutrition. And then, of course, our education system itself needing a lot of work. Of course, We have this education commission going on right now, and I happen to be part of it in one of the standing committees. And so, indeed, that is ongoing right now. And then Marian mentioned about, again, our cultural and artistic wealth in this country. And I've often challenged both our economic and political leaders that perhaps if we cannot excel in the science, technology, mathematics, that we are miserably at the bottom of in the world, then maybe we can capitalize on the talent and the artistic and cultural wealth that we have and do a Korea. I mean, we all know how Korea has really jockeyed their cultural industries into a big contributor to their economy. And not only that, into getting soft power in the world. So this is where I would like to see this administration put more of its investments in, not so much infrastructure as his father did. Of course, that was the legacy apparently remembered by most. But if this time around that investment is done on the greatest wealth of the country, our people themselves, then I think he can make a difference for our future. And I hope that's the kind of legacy that he would like to leave, apart from, again, cleaning up the family name by really being the one to start curbing corruption in our midst.
I share Marian's view expressed earlier that just by being elected, he already helped rehabilitate his father's name. Now his father is just another president. You know, people have normalized that 20-year period. There are so many more questions that I want to ask, and it's not on my list anymore, but we're running short of time. I want to ask those. I want to go back to the idea of corruption. We know that Bongbong Marcos is lukewarm about the impeachment of Sara Duterte. Let me backtrack. The arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte, would that be part of his legacy? Marcos's legacy?
Well, it depends on the outcome of all of this. But indeed, that was a very important, shall we say, turning point. The fact that we had a president who was, of course, widely known to have been on top of, shall we say, use the words of the International Criminal Court, crimes against humanity. For that to even happen, for that arrest to happen, is really an important milestone under the leadership of President Marcos. Well, like I said, it all depends on the final outcome, and we all know that is still pretty much up in the air.
Let me just complete my thought. So you have the arrest of Rodrigo Duterte, and now you have the impeachment trial of Sara Duterte. Do you think that Marcos should, instead of having a lukewarm attitude to the impeachment, fully embrace it and make it the start of an anti-corruption campaign? I mean,
he certainly could. Because to me, that's very symbolic to me. That he would not actually allow this kind of corruption and misdeeds as a national leader go unpunished and go just let them have free pass, and that's a very important step. But precisely we hope that he goes beyond that and really does things that are more decisive and substantive in reducing the opportunities for the same things that Duterte and his cohorts were known for.
Marian, your thoughts on this?
I don't think any Marcos has any moral capital to lead an anti-corruption drive, initiative. I think it would be hypocritical. I think what we could hope for, and this concerns your question, and this is my answer to your question, John. I do not know how much we will credit Ferdinand Marcos Jr. for the capture of his predecessor. Frankly, I'm indifferent to how much we give him credit for. What we all need to give credit to are the people who have worked so hard since 2016 to get it done And as you know, there are many, many people who built the case, not to mention the victims' families. And by focusing, and I've said this in several fora, by overly focusing on the family feud, and that this is all between two families, we are actually losing sight of the numerous Filipinos who have worked for this to happen. And we cannot forget those numerous other Filipinos because, I'm always trying to put my finger on, we have to look at the Filipinos who are doing the work, whatever field it is, doing the work of mitigating against decay of democratic institutions. And certainly these are people who are trying to mitigate decay in the justice system. In the particular case of Duterte Sr., it's simply a question of defining what constitutes a crime against humanity and a normal crime which should be in the justice system. Basic ideas like that, which are totally misunderstood, are really the sticks and stones of democratic decay. And we have Filipinos who are working on it.
Well, I agree with Marian there. I mean, indeed, we cannot ignore, and we should not, by any means, downplay the important role that so many more Filipinos actually got us to where we are right now in terms of, persecuting and prosecuting. I mean, the former president, and hopefully everybody else closely associated with all the misdeeds of his administration.
Hopefully.
Maybe, thank you. One last question for the both of you. I don't think that the ordinary Filipino citizen spends time or a lot of time thinking about legacies, even of their favorite presidents, right? But the idea of legacy is important for journalists, certainly, for historians, for political scientists, for academics, for strategic thinkers and so on, and maybe even for cultural critics and curators. Is it in fact something we should encourage more citizens to do? Think about what legacy is of an incumbent president or a mayor or a governor.
I'll give the last word to Marian, but let me just say something. It's not so much the leaving of a legacy that is that we want we want Filipinos in general to appreciate, but the kind of legacy precisely. And this is again, I go back to corruption, which is the legacy that I was hoping, against hope, I suppose, that this president will try to leave as his own legacy. But I think I'm encouraged by the fact that people seem to be increasingly aware and appreciative of the cost that corruption has imposed on our economy and on our society in general. There's a growing awareness also of the evils of dynastyism. And again, partly the results of the last election showed that. So I think given that, and if the rest of us who have been advocating on these for the longest time, can continue and pushing so that the average Filipino will appreciate the need to really stamp out corruption in our midst, then we are making headway. So that is the reason why I go back to that legacy that I hope this president can make.
Thank you. And Marian?
Well, you did say cultural critics like Marian at the end of your list, and that's correct, because people like me are very leery, and the word is leery, of the word legacy. Mostly because most legacy building is corrupt. Most legacy building institutionally solidifies a version of a person or a set of ideas in museums, in academic work, in archives, in the public sphere, which is untrue. And you know that this happens every day. The people spend so that their family names would be, the biggest false legacy is facing us in the person of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The fact that he's rehabilitating a horrendous part of Philippine history is legacy building that we should all be wary of. So no, I think what we need is to be very critical on legacy building and to see what is what.
Thank you. This has been most instructive. I have so many more questions to ask, but that's all the time that we have. Professor Cielito Habito and Ma'am Marian Pastor Roces, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, Shell.
Marian, see you again.
And that's it for us today. The next step for engaged citizens, as always, is to take a more active part in the democratic project. Please download the Rappler Communities app and join the chat room of your choice. And if you haven't yet, join Rappler Plus. Thank you. This is John Nery. See you in the public square.